everyone. All right, I'm going to give it one more minute before we start moving into the introduction. But yeah, feel free to share in the chat where you're calling in from or tuning in from, what company you're representing. Would love to know. Get the get the pot stirring in the chat. Don't be shy. All right, Abhishek, Mojito Labs, Shopify Development Agency. Welcome, Abhishek. Thank you for commenting. And Manjari from India, from Strobes Security. Welcome, welcome.
Nice.
Awesome. And also welcome to a couple of note takers in the house. Love seeing some AI note takers. Can't get away from them.
I know, I know. I mean, I don't think we can get away from AI, period, at this point, right? It's just like
Exactly.
it ain't
Yeah.
going nowhere.
Nope. Artie from Lead Walnut. Welcome, Artie. Tracy, Fractional
Welcome.
Marketing Director for Hospitality SaaS, Richmond, Virginia. Good morning to you. Or should I say, is it? Yeah, it's morning still. Okay,
Yeah, it's morning over here.
cool. Vicky, Atlas Systems, Saranya from Chennai, content marketer at Kiram Finance. Disha joining in from London, senior content marketing manager at Whatfix. Welcome. Awesome. Seems like we have a really full crowd here. So welcome everybody to episode 12 of Coach by TripleDart. I'm Glenn Bona, your host and associate director of organic growth here at TripleDart. And like all of you, I am super pumped for today's session. Before we jump in, quick context for anyone new to the series and also the company behind it. TripleDart is a B2B SaaS growth marketing agency focused on paid and organic channels. Since launching in 2021, we've grown to a team of 70 plus marketing professionals across India, Singapore, and the US, partnering with brands like Airbase, Freshworks, ClickUp, as well as many other household names to drive predictable pipeline. So if you're curious about how we can help you scale your business, don't hesitate to get in touch with me or apply directly through our website at tripledart.com. Moving on, Coach by TripleDart is our way of giving back to the marketing community. We bring in operators, practitioners, people who are in the field, people who are in the trenches, the marketing trenches, so to speak, testing, iterating, and driving real business outcomes. The goal isn't theory, it's practical insight that you can take back to your team this morning, this afternoon, wherever you're tuning in, maybe tomorrow if it's super late for you. But yeah. And now I'm excited to introduce today's guest. Lashay Lewis has spent over a decade as a content strategist where she's built and scaled high performing bottom of the funnel programs, BOFU programs that didn't just drive targeted traffic, but they drove pipeline. Since becoming a consultant in 2023, she's helped SaaS teams increase blog conversions from 6 to 30 per month in under 5 months, improve conversion rates from 5 to 30% in about 90 days, secure dozens of first page rankings, drive 7 figures in inbound pipeline. But what really stands out about Lashay's work is her clarity around one thing. We all know that traffic alone doesn't pay the bills, although it's a very pretty vanity metric. Lashay specializes in helping content teams move beyond the top of the funnel noise and build a bottom of the funnel program that actually converts, that actually brings in pipeline and revenue. So if you've ever thought we're publishing a lot, but we're not seeing leads, why is paid doing a lot of the heavy lifting? Or how do I improve blog impact on pipeline? Well, this session is for you. So grab your notebooks, grab your pens, get that digital notepad out. This is going to be incredibly tactical. And Lashay, welcome to Coach by TripleDart. We're super excited to have you on. And the team, if we can help unmute Lashay, we can get rocking and rolling on this presentation.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, there we go. Awesome.
Hey
Now
everybody.
now you know we're live.
Right. Like it's not recorded. We're here. We're doing it. Hey
We're doing
everybody.
it
I'm so
live.
excited to be here. I I don't know. I'm just excited to be able to give you some good stuff today. As Glenn so kindly mentioned, uh, when I started consulting, I noticed like a lot of consultants and agencies alike uh, really focused on top of funnel. And I think it's because really two things. Number one, it just looks sexier on charts to see hockey sticks and, see graphs up and to the right. But I think the second thing is that people didn't really know how to write bottom of funnel content. It's very nuanced, it's very tricky. So coming into the industry and being able to try to fill that gap a little bit was important to me, mainly because I really wanted to work somewhere before doing all this. And I didn't get a chance to work there because I didn't know enough. I didn't know how to write good bottom of funnel content. And I think that experience hurt me so bad that I was like, I'm never going to lose another opportunity because I didn't know enough. And it's kind of the mission I have now, right? I don't want people to not know enough, whether you're in-house consulting, whatever it is. I don't want you to not know enough to be able to be dangerous, especially as a content marketer. We get treated a little bit worse than other teams, so to speak. Maybe like the sales team. I hate to call out sales directly, but like it's a marketing and sales thing. So I think delivering this information to me means giving content marketers a seat at the revenue table. And if that's what, it takes to do that, I'm here to carry the load and help spread this message far and wide.
Yep, we love it. We love it. And we're super pumped to learn from you today, Lashay.
I'm excited to teach today. Okay, so let's start. We're not even gonna waste any time with it. Let's start off. And so I'm gonna walk you through step by step how I build a bottom of funnel content system, right? So I've perfected this over, I don't even want to say perfected, I'm always learning. I've gotten pretty good at this over a period of 3 years or so. It took me 2.5 years to figure out how to integrate AI into this process because it's a very productized, nuanced process. But I think, or my hope is that you take something from this and learn something new. So Glenn did an amazing job introducing me in. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Uh, just know that I work with some pretty cool companies. I've done some pretty cool work. I have done a lot of different things in my career, but more so just like again, that bottom of funnel focus is my expertise. And also it takes a while for me to learn things. So my thought in creating all of this was like, how do I make things easier for me to figure out and me to learn? But again, I'm not going to spend too much time here because Glenn did an amazing job on introductions. But getting into what we're going to cover here. So there are five primary phases of the BOFU content system. There's customer and product research, competitor research, keyword research and content strategy, content creation and publishing, and then tracking. So we're going to get into really four of these today. The only thing I'm not really going to dive too deep into is to tracking because that's a whole separate workshop. I will touch on it a little bit and tell you like maybe some good tools that you can use out there to be able to attribute this content, but mainly we're going to focus on the first four because that's where the really the heavy lifting is done. So what makes good bottom of funnel content? So it's a few different things. It's having content that's relevant to your persona, meaning that, and I say this all the time, like content isn't written in a vacuum. Uh, Especially if you are working at a company that has multiple personas and multiple ICPs and things like that, you you're not writing to everybody all at once. You're writing to a specific persona depending on whatever the article's about, whatever the use case of the article is about, right? So having content that pertains to that specific person is utterly important. Highly contextual and explains your product or service in context of the use case. Again, what search term are we going after? What's the use case? And how do we make our product connect to that in a way that helps the reader be able to effectively understand it, and how it applies to their life in their specific workflow? It explains what your competitors do well. It goes into detail about your capabilities with live examples. It includes real prospect pain points. It intentionally connects pains, benefits, and capabilities. It prioritizes customer insight over search engines. I can't express this last point enough. There, there's such a over indexation, and it makes sense, right? Like I get it, but there's an over indexation on like, oh, we need to prioritize for like Google, and now it's not being replaced, but now alongside it, we need to prioritize for GPT. Like, how do we optimize for these LLMs with this content? And the answer is sort of like a paradox. In order to be able to effectively show up for AI search, you need to know who your customer is and you need to speak directly to them. If you do not do that, the odds of you showing up for AI search is going to be pretty slim to none. So we're going to cover all of that today. So what makes bottom of funnel content not so good? Again, back to the point I just left off with. Focused on search engines over customer insight, briefly covering your features. I'm not trying to call anybody out, but when I see bottom of funnel articles like best versus an alternative, and it's like this super long article, and the company section is like super short, and it's like 3 bullet points of features that they cover, and then they move on to the next competitor. That's not how you want to do that, right? And again, we'll cover the right way to do it, but this is not how you want to do it. And then talking down on your competitors. So I deal with this a lot with in-house marketers and having to talk to executive leadership and say, hey, we really need to do this bottom of funnel content. But the problem is a lot of the time executive leadership does not want to do that. And it's because, oh, we're going to bring attention to our competitors. And, I don't want to talk down on them or anything like that. Well, you shouldn't talk down on them just in goodwill, but also it could hurt you in terms of AI search. And I will tie that back later on. No contextual examples. Again, you can write content all day long, but if you're not tying it to the the persona's workflow, there's no association there, right? That you need to like tell the story of how this fits into their workflow. Copying from other websites. So in this case, I would say like that was more of like how us writers were taught back in the day to like Google a search term and then take like the top 10 search results and like smush them together and that's an article. Today it would be more of like going to GPT and being like, hey, this is a keyword I want to write around. Can you create me an outline around this? That's not the right way to do it either. So we'll cover that too. And then no logical connection from pains to capabilities. If you are talking about a customer's pains, again, how does your product solve that specifically? Like what are we getting into the specifics of how a product solves an actual pain? And it's such a huge thing that I see a lot of people miss. So I wanted to add that in here. So the reason that it's difficult to make bottom of funnel content is it requires input from every team, right? So sales, customer success, and the product team. So for sales, we want to ask questions like which prospects are buying the solution and what are their most common pain points and what's the most common title of the person buying. And then for customer success, it's questions like who are our largest accounts, what customers have a low support headache. And then for product, it's what are the capabilities of the product? How does the product fit contextually in a customer's workflow? But not just that, right? Not just the individual teams. There are overlapping questions between each team. So between sales and customer success is what's the benefit of the pain point being solved? Between CS and product, it's what benefits do the capabilities provide? And then between sales and product, it's how does the product solve the pain points, right? So it's not just getting information from each one of these teams individually. Now we have to find the questions that overlap between each team. And then us as marketers, our job is to take all this information and produce collateral from it. That's what we do. Now, the problem with this is that most in-house content teams are formulated a little something like this. The infra the infrastructure of the company is very siloed. So sales only talks to sales, and marketing only talks to marketing, and CS only talks to CS, so on and so forth. The problem with that is that information stays contained within these silos. And then the bigger problem with that is that we need this information in order to create this bottom of funnel content, really more than just bottom of funnel, but like since that's our focus, I want to lean in on that. We need information from all these teams. So I think a bigger issue here is more of like the culture of the company. Us as content marketers cannot control the culture of the company. We are adopted into the culture when we're hired. And I tell people all the time, like, culture is dripped from the top down, not the bottom up. It's executive leadership's responsibility to cultivate culture, not our responsibility. But ideally, what we would want this to look like is something like this. Sales talks to marketing, marketing talks to product, product talks to CS, CS talks to sales. And this is how we get information flowing from one team to the next team. So, starting to dive into this, the customer and product research portion, which is phase one, uh, there are a couple things we want to do here. Yeah, I would say any questions on this before we dive into customer research?
We're gonna do Q&A after. So if you have questions, please add them to the chat. But yeah, Lashay, you can go ahead. I think somebody's mic kind of just tripped up.
Okay, all right. So we have phase one, which is customer and product research. So from here, what we want to do is gather internal documentation. So this is anything from ideal customer profile documentation, persona documentation, feature benefit pairings, battle cards, sales deck, case studies, whatever it is. I usually like to describe this as if it describes what the product is, what it does, and who it serves. That's the internal information you want to gather. This is a big step that a lot of companies miss, but it's literally the foundation for everything we're going to talk about. So it's important to go through these first and collect up on this information. So essentially, what we're trying to do here is build a knowledge base and then work outward from that knowledge base. So typically when people are doing bottom of funnel content, they start here. They start with the comparison pages, the checklist, the buyer enablement guides, the one pages, like they start here. When in order to be able to do this, you actually need to start here, which is aligning these internal teams. Again, I'll teach you a way to like mitigate that process, being that again, we don't control the culture. We'll go through some steps here, but it's important to think about this inward and then expanding outward versus just starting outward. So the first step in this process is again gathering that internal documentation, but essentially what this looks like is if you have documents in Google Drive, wherever they're at, right? So this is another thing. A lot of times internal documentation is like spread out between different platforms, different teams, right? It could be some stuff in HubSpot. It could be some stuff in Notion, in G Drive. It's everywhere. So the first thing I would employ you to do is gather as much internal documentation as you can in one centralized place. So I love using Claude for this process. Like Claude is like my best friend for this. Because what Claude allows you to do is create a project. And then within that project, you're able to upload as much internal documentation as you can. I mean, think even on the pro plan for $20 a month, you can upload quite a bit of information in there for that price. But you upload all these internal docs into a project. And essentially, what I like to do from there is then produce this sort of output here, which is customer and product info, right? So I have these sort of markdowns. And what I'll do is I will upload the markdown to Claude. And then I'll say, can you use this internal documentation to fill in this customer and product research framework for, in this case, it's NHTSA, which was one of my clients, but like your company, right? And then what it'll do is it'll go through that internal documentation and fill in all this information. And what you get at the end of that is a product market analysis, right? So there are a couple different things here that are important. Number one, it breaks your product down, which is very, very important, especially if you're working at an org where it's not just, again, one product, one ICP, one persona. You really want to make sure to capture that granularity as you're doing this process. So if you can see even here in this screenshot, here, let me pull this to the front. So it's breaking down different personas, right? So persona deep dive, this is persona one. I think NHTSA had like 6 different personas, but in each one of those personas, it got into the basic profile and the responsibilities and daily activities and the pain points and challenges. And then you can see over here, this is persona number 2. And again, it goes back to the point of like this process not being in a vacuum. Every piece of content that you create is not going to speak to every single segment of your audience unless you are at a vertical company, meaning that you have one product, one ICP, and that's it. This tends to get a little bit more tighter. But again, that's not most people's cases, you know? So this is the first step in that process, right? Is gathering that internal intelligence and then neatly organizing it into a product market analysis document. That's step 1. Phase 2 is competitor research. So I get a lot of questions on this. And again, back to my point earlier, a lot of companies don't want to do this. I mean, it feels icky to them. It's very like, well, you know, I don't want to talk down on my competitors. I don't want to do that. Well, the thing is, you shouldn't do that, number one. But number 2, you don't have to do that. That's not how I look at competitor research. So when we do competitor research, what we're looking for is where you win, your direct, niche, and broad competitors, your differentiators, competitor reviews, and then market positioning, right? So when I think about competitor research, this is how I like to break it down. So I call this the competitor rubrics. And essentially, when I'm first working with a company, and I think even before that, one of the highest converting keywords that I have found to drive in demos sooner than later is alternative style keywords. We'll touch on that in a little bit, but I just want to bring it up here to kind of like tie it all together. The reason that this is important is because this is how we find those alternative search terms, competitor alternative, right? So I have a little bit of a rule of thumb. So just to explain what these are, direct competitors are competitors who sit in the same category as you and have a feature set similar to yours, right? Same category, same feature set, same use cases. That's a direct competitor. Niche competitors are competitors who sit in the same category but have less features and less use cases, right? So more of a niche solution. Maybe you sit in the same category, but they just serve a smaller segment of the total addressable market. And then you have broad competitors, competitors who sit in the same category but have a larger feature set and serve a bigger portion of the market, right? So for this example, I am using Webflow here, but when I break those down, so for Webflow, if I wanted to say, okay, I want to talk about the direct competitors, it'd be Framer, Editor X, and then Semplice. For niche, it'd be Card, Doric, and TypeDream. And then for broad, it'd be Wix, HubSpot, CMS, and Shopify. So when I'm primarily working with a company, I focus on direct and niche first. If you want it in order, direct first and then niche afterward. I stay away from broad, mainly because if you go broad, you are going to be fighting an uphill battle. You don't have enough use cases to compete. You probably don't serve enough of the total addressable market to compete. There is nuance here, though. If they serve a specific market segment that you also serve, and maybe your feature set is more robust for that specific segment, and you can find keywords that match that specific segment, then you could possibly go after them. Again, that's like more of like nuance and edge cases and things like that. But generally, you don't want to target broad competitors, just an uphill battle that you do not want to fight. So when I think about how I run this process with AI, there's a couple different things that I do here. So I have four different kind of like high level things that I'm running here. It's the competitive landscape, competitive intelligence, gap analysis and strategic insights, and then actionable competitive strategies, right? And then each one of these four core phases has multiple uh, things that I'm running.
I'm sorry. Let's try to
No worries.
mute Naima. All right.
We're good. Okay.
Thank you.
Uh,
Yeah.
so each one of these four high level things has competitors underneath of it, or more of like not competitors necessarily, but like competitive info underneath of it. So we cover everything in here, right? So like direct competitors, niche competitors, broad, kind of like what we just covered, market share, head-to-head competitive threat, pain points, like everything in here. And this is how deep you want to go on this information again, because with bottom of funnel content, it's very like we're we need to do a lot of positioning work in order to make sure that we're positioning ourselves against another competitor properly. Just because they are a competitor doesn't mean we should write a piece around them unless we have that core positioning dialed in. And unless we have this information and understand, like, okay, we have a firm chance of being able to like go head to head against them. So typically how I do this process is the same of like how I do the customer and product research. So competitive positioning and then competitors positioning. There are two prompts I run for this. So when I think about the positioning in this term, I run a deep research run on Perplexity uh, for the company that I am working with. The reason that I do this is because positioning is really just what you think about your company internally or what you know your company to be internally versus how the market sees your company externally. When those two things are married, that's when you have positioning. So, what I like to do is run an external research on the company I'm working with, but then I like to turn around and run an external research on my competitors, right? So, that's step one of this. And then what you get from that is two different things. So, this is one of my clients here, Work Proud. So competitive positioning, again, this is an outward facing summary of the company. Like this is how the company is seen outwardly. What I like to do is pair that with internal documentation and then enrich it further. And again, it took me a while to come to this conclusion, but it's more of like we are always going to see our company differently than how other people see it. So, for example, with BOFU.ai, there's a software arm to that. Initially, I thought I was solving one use case, right? Which is being able to create bottom of funnel content. Come to find out, we're solving multiple use cases. It's bottom of funnel content, it's product information, it's all these different things, right? So now when I think about how externally the market is seeing my company, then I could match the positioning with that. And then you have, I don't know if I would go too far as say product market fit, but you're on the right track if you do it that way, if you think about it that way, right? So this is your company information. Competitor information, there's also a deep research ran on the competitor, and you have a ton of information about them, like the executive summary, who their niche, direct, and broad competitors are, G2 reviews, Reddit information, like all of all of this different information about the company, like where their gaps are, like what are their customers saying about the pain points that they're dealing with from your competitors' products, which is huge, really for two reasons. Number one, it helps you position your product to solve those pain points that their customers are dealing with. Number two, you could give it to the product team, and that kind of helps flesh out the product roadmap. So that's kind of what I do on the competitive positioning front. Phase three of this is keyword research and content strategy. So what we need to do when building our content strategy, there are a couple things we need to do. We use the customer and product research to guide keyword research. This is huge, mainly because I've seen a lot of people not do it. I used to be the same way, right? So when I would start working with a company, I would talk to them. I would say, hey, like, okay, what do we do? I would go and look around the website a little bit, try to get like a feel of what's going on. Immediately from there, I would start doing keyword research and be like, okay, I think they're this type of company. They sit in this category. So we're going to target these type of keywords. That's working backwards. So what you really want to do is from that first step we did, you take that customer and product research and you use that to guide keyword research. Well, how do you do that? Well, your audience is talking about the problems that they have associated with your product probably differently than you would think they are. And when you pull that internal documentation, you'll see the language. Well, especially if you pull sales call transcripts, those are gold. You can pull the language verbatim out of those sales calls and see how they are talking about the problems that they're having. And that's important. Again, we'll tie that all together. And then use competitor research to guide keyword research. Again, to my point of like this here, this Rubik's, like understanding who our competitors are so we could, again, tie that back to the search terms that we want to go after, mainly the versus and alternative style search terms. And then use your positioning to understand what use cases to target. Your company is in a specific category. You are not going to target every single use case known to man, not unless you're like a Salesforce or something. You know what I mean? That's not a lot of people's cases. So again, going back to the example with BOFU, it's like, well, yeah, I could have tried to be like the RevOps of the world and try to create just an entire SEO platform. But, well, a couple different things. Number one, I'm not actively trying to go after funding to attack a project like that. So it's like, for me, I'm like, okay, I want to build the software. I want to do this thing. What's the positioning here? Right? So bottom of funnel is a subcategory. It's a use case under the broader category of SEO. So if I want to come out with this thing, I'm like, okay, I need to target a specific use case versus just the broader category of SEO, you know? So, and I like to use that example because I had to think through this for my own product. So I can kind of get you to think about it in multiple different ways from like a marketer standpoint, but then also a founder perspective too. Using features to better understand use cases. So we want to deeply understand the features of our product. Again, to my point earlier, which is why you need to talk to the product team because they typically have the most insight to how features and capabilities of the product works. So we want to dig into it that way. And then once we understand how the features operate in workflows, we better understand the use cases that it solves, right? So this is what we want to focus on, at least initially. When we start getting into content strategy breakdowns here, there are multiple different ways you can go about doing this. You can break your content strategy down by product, industry, or topic. So diving deep in here, I had made a Salesforce reference a little bit ago, but I'm going to like bring it back around now. I wanted to use the most messiest, most biggest, confusing type of product. And say, if I had to create a content strategy for Salesforce tomorrow, given how big that company is and how many products they have, how would I do that? So if I'm thinking about the content strategy, again, there are three ways to break this down. If I'm looking at Salesforce, I'm going to break it down by product, or I could break it down by product, right? So we have the different products here: Agentforce, Slack, Tableau, and Salesforce itself, right? And then there is a top, middle, and bottom of funnel strategy within each one of these segments that we can target, right? But before I dig into that, let me go to the next way to break this down. So the second way we can break this down is by industry here. So let me like send that back so you can see everything. So again, if I'm using Salesforce as the example and I wanted to break the content strategy down by industry, it could be manufacturing, financial services, technology, and then retail, because that's what Salesforce covers, right? And then if I'm going back down here, we could do topic too. So again, using Salesforce as the example, the topic could be customer retention, it could be sales enablement, it could be onboarding, it could be go-to-market execution. A general rule of thumb for when I do this is you do not want to start with all these. You're going to confuse yourself. The reason I like to have this way, well, number one, I learn visually and I'm forcing you to learn visually here too. But also like this helps give insight to other team members on seeing the strategy at a 30,000 foot view. Like we could talk about spreadsheets. Some people love spreadsheets. I particularly don't like them that much. It's just a personal preference thing. I much prefer to see a strategy visually where I can see like, okay, here are high level topics here. So some people will call them pillars. Here are the pillars here. Here's what we're looking at under each pillar. And again, this is a very simplified way to look at this. Again, we think any seasoned marketer understands like the funnel is proverbial. Like there is no real funnel. Somebody could go from bottom of funnel and jump to top and then go in the middle and then convert. We don't know, but this is an easy way for people across the org to conceptualize, okay, this is what we're doing from a content marketing perspective. So again, I implore you not to try to do all this at one time. Choose one and then execute from there, right? So once we have this broken down here, we have two different ways to execute on the content strategy. So we could do it horizontally or we could do it vertically. One last point that I'm thinking about. One last point in terms of content strategy breakdown here is if your company has multiple products, you might want to break this down by product. If your company has one product but serves multiple industries, you'd want to break it down by industry. If your company is more so aligned with topical information, maybe it doesn't do either one of these, you want to break it down by topic. All right. So I just wanted to like throw that in there so you can know, okay, in what circumstance do I even do any one of these? I would kind of use that as a rule of thumb. But in terms of content strategy execution, it's two ways we can do that. So horizontally, right? This is me breaking this down by industry here. We start within one segment, let's say manufacturing, and then we exhaust bottom of the funnel for that specific segment. After that's done, we move horizontal to the next segment and exhaust bottom of funnel, and then so on, and then so forth. For vertical, same thing as before. We choose one segment, start bottom of funnel because that's where the leads and the pipeline and all the fun stuff is at. Once we exhaust bottom of funnel here, we move up the funnel to middle of funnel. And I always tell people this, middle of funnel content converts too. You just need to know how to write it. A lot of people don't know how to write it. It's more nuance than bottom of funnel content. But I find if you make it more product led, it does convert pretty well. So those are the two ways you can go about doing this. And I have people ask me all the time, well, Lashay, like, yeah, this is great, but like, how do you know which one I should start with first? It depends on the company's goals, first of all. So let's look at this at a couple different layers. So let's say, again, we have the Salesforce example here, and these are the different industries. Let's say that 90% of our revenue comes from manufacturing. That's where we want to start. We want to start where we're already capturing revenue and then drill in further. From there, that's when we want to move to the second highest thing that's generating us revenue, and then drill in there. Unless executive leadership has some sort of request and say, hey, for this quarter, we want to focus on said segment. And again, like when I work with clients, I'm asking them like, okay, where does the money come in from? And like, what are we focusing on this quarter? Because if I know what we're focusing on for the quarter, then I can say, okay, let's exhaust as many bottom of funnel terms as we can before we move on anywhere else, or at least let's do it for this quarter. And then maybe like 2 more quarters down the line, we'll start to see pipeline for this segment that we worked on. So again, I want you to think about sort of where the revenue in your company comes from, what industry, what product line, whatever it is, and then start bottom of funnel there and then work your way either straight across to other industries or work your way up within one segment. So when I think about keyword research, I break it down a couple different ways. So I call this the BOFU radar. And essentially, when I'm thinking about keywords, I'm breaking them out across 4 different categories here. So it's ICP, specifically by department. It is category, competitors, and features and use cases. So just to give you an example of each of these, so an ICP based keyword would be worded like marketing manager productivity software, right? So because for ClickUp, ICP could be a marketing manager, right? So again, tying the ICP into the keyword. And then a category keyword is what's the category that the tool is sitting in. So ClickUp is considered to be in the project management category. So we just do project management software. And then competitors, keywords that include competitors. And so for example, Trello alternatives, because Trello is an alternative to ClickUp, right? And then features, project management software with dashboard. So this is a specific feature of ClickUp. So we have that included in the keyword there. And then these are just like some different prompts, sort of like shortened prompts that I use to get outputs that look like this. Here, which is like department plus specific pain point plus solution, right? And this is one pattern. And then here's another pattern, job title and productivity. Let me move this to the front so you can see it. Like here, and then pattern 4, best solution for department, right? Best ITM platform for enterprise IT, right? So just tackling as many keywords or as many angles as we possibly can. And then the same thing here, right? For category, best software asset management software, best software asset management solution platform. The thing I would be saying is be careful about cannibalization because these keywords are very, very similar to one another. Some of them can kind of be combined a little bit. So for example, if you have keywords that are sort of like have a synonymous term on the end of it. So for example, best software asset management software and then solution. These could be synonymous with one another. Also, software and platform could also be synonymous. So you don't have to write 2 different blog posts around these 2 things. You could kind of combine them in one article. I just wanted to call that out. And then here, I've got one for features and one for competitors. And then these are kind of like what those looks like. Competitor versus you, competitor alternative, competitor versus you. And it dives deep into that as well. And here like some prompts in here for features and competitors. And that's how I like to break that down. Even if you're using a tool like Ahrefs, for example, finding keywords by modifier. So you could add a filter here. You do best versus an alternative to find some bottom of funnel search terms. You could put in a competitor's URL and do this as well. And then you could also do it by word count. So bottom of funnel keywords typically are more longer string, where it's like 4 words in the query. So I like to filter by 4. You can play with this. You can filter by 5, 6, and see where you get with that. But I typically find that 4 is the sweet spot. And then for coming up with keywords, just like if you're like, okay, this is all great. I need keywords like in 2 minutes. You take your direct niche, and again, we're leaving out broad, and you match them with alternative and versus, right? So framer alternative, and then editor X alternative, and then Simplice alternative. Then you could flip it around and do versus. Webflow versus framer, Webflow versus editor X, Webflow versus Simplice. And if you do this with just the direct and niche rubrics here, you get like 12 different search terms just by doing that. So this is something that I would do if I'm just like, hey, I need keywords right now. Also, a couple other things here, just like some formulas, right? So best category software for use case, best category software, competitor alternatives, competitor versus your product, and then competitor versus your product, competitor versus competitor versus competitor versus your product. I had somebody ask me like, so how many of these would you do? I wouldn't go beyond four. The reason I like this strategy is because what you can do is you can take search volume from two other competitors and insert yourself into the conversation. So for example, if I'm like outreach, the company outreach, and I'm looking at Clary versus Gong, I see they get 50 searches a month. I can do Gong versus Clary versus outreach. And then immediately I've inserted myself into a conversation that I was not in, and I'm able to capture up on the search volume here. So that's something that I really like to do. I've got something here too. It's a GIF. I don't know if it's gonna play if it's viewed like this, but it's sort of like the alphabet soup method. Let me see if I can like show it to you in this window. If you'll see the GIFs here. But just going into Google and then just literally typing in like best category for A, B, C. And then by doing things that way, you will find probably a ton of different terms that you didn't think about. People always underestimate Google auto suggest, but I promise if it's in here, somebody's searching for it. So I would say think about that too in terms of how you find keywords. If you're like super tight and you don't have any like budget for any tools or anything, this is a good way to do that. So from here, we've got content creation and publishing. And I'm going to try to like condense this down as tight as I can so we have time for questions. But again, it took me 2 years to figure this out, integrating AI into the process. So I do something called framework-based prompting. Again, so typically when you think about somebody going to use an LLM for article creation, they go say, hey, I'm looking to create a keyword around this article here. I want to do this, this, and that, create my article. But I find that's not the best way to do things. And I'll get into that. But optimizing your content for contextual search is very important, especially when it comes to showing up in AI search. Capturing pain point related questions is also really important. So when I do my bottom of funnel content, I'm breaking it down by a few core elements. It's pain points, features, benefits, and capabilities. Like this is what all my bottom of funnel content is made from. And I have a very modular fashion in how I do this. So essentially, pains are what the prospect is struggling with. Features is what the product does. Benefits is the benefit you get from said feature. And then the capability is how the feature works. So breaking this down this way, this is an article I did for Teal maybe like 2.5 years ago. But if you type in Resi Alternatives, it's still ranking. It's also showing up in AI search. And I believe that to be for a couple different reasons. But this is just sort of like a high level breakdown. And I can share this with everybody after the workshop so you can kind of like dig in and see what's happening here. But again, all my bottom of funnel content is built in a very modular fashion. And it's really just a mix of like pain points, leading off with those, and then features and then capabilities in here. And so when I think about framework-based prompting, it's like having a frame, like the framework is the prompt. Everything I do is from frameworks. The framework is the prompt. And what happens is that customer information is being pulled directly into the content. Again, if you do your due diligence on customer research, you will have the exact pain points that your audience is dealing with. Those pain points are then injected to the actual framework, and the framework serves as the initial prompt. And then like diving into this part here is just like kind of what this looks like on the back end might be a little bit intimidating. But when I use Claude, it's not that intimidating. It kind of looks like this for Claude. And then I just tell Claude to like fill it in for me, So getting to, and again, I'm going to try to keep this like under 5 minutes, but this is the important part. So when I think about an AI search, I think about the contextual nature of it. So you think about how somebody types into Google, best this for that. That's not quite how they're typing into AI search. So for Teal, for example, if somebody is in an LLM looking for a company like Teal, they're having a problem, right? It's more so like this, where Google would be like best AI resume builder. For this, it'd be more of like, I'm looking for a job and I need a resume builder. I'm struggling to show the impact of my work in managing my multiple resumes. I need a tool that lets me edit and manage in one place. Can you recommend me a resume builder that can help with this, right? So breaking this down, we have a category here, which is a resume builder. It's a category. Persona, I'm looking for a job. Who's the persona here? I have it literally the first word in the article, job seekers. And then coming back here, I'm struggling to show the impact of my work in managing my multiple resumes. That's a pain point. Where is that at? Right here in the intro. That's why we start off with pain points. And then capability here, edit and manage all in one place. Going back here, that is one of the features that I have in the article, but everything is like smartly and logically tied together. And kind of like the result of that is being able to show up in AI search, right? So when I did this query, what's the best resume builder if I have multiple resumes? Teal shows up first for that, also comes up here. You can also see the type of articles that Perplexity is pulling to even be able to surface this information, right? So this is one example. And then another example here is a totally different query. I do have a screenshot of this where I'm doing it in incognito because I know somebody's gonna be like, it says Lashay right there. You told it to say that. But I've got another screenshot that's an incognito mode of this and it still comes up. But the query is different, right? I'm looking for a job and I need a resume builder. I'm struggling to show the impact of my work, managing my multiple resumes and keeping track of my resumes and job search. Can you recommend me a resume builder that can help with this? Again, Teal comes up first. Another different search. I'm having trouble keeping track of my resumes across different platforms. What tool can help me with this? Again, Teal again. And AI understands synonymous search, meaning that you do not have to know exactly the query that's going to be typed in for AI to be able to pick up semantically that you solve the problem. All you need to do is topically get relevant that, okay, this is the problem that we solve. You need to articulate that in the content. AI is smart enough to be able to make the association of like, okay, they solve this problem. And again, that's the importance of sales call transcripts because if you can extract that information off the sales call, 9 times out of 10, the way they're explaining their problem to you is how they're typing their problem into an LLM. That's the big takeaway. Like that's the association that you kind of want to make between your article and an LLM search. And then diving here, another client I was working with, Conveyor, keyword we were going after. How would somebody type that in LLMs? Probably something like this. I've been using Lupio for questionnaire automation, but I'm not happy with it. Can you recommend me an alternative? Conveyor comes up first. And then again, another synonymous search. Query is totally different here. Conveyor shows up, unfortunately, not first for this one, but second. But it's pulling information from different sources here. And I know I know we want to leave some time for questions. I want to try to like wrap this up at 10:25. But I guess I have a little bit more information here. And it's really just like about citations and brand mentions, more so like the reason I told you in the beginning you don't want to talk down on your competitors because AI will use your competitors to validate information about you. So even here, this is Resi's website. This is a direct competitor to Teal. They have Teal listed on their website, not the best review, but what have you. And then the Resi website here is an overview of Teal, but AI is still smart enough to make that association that, okay, Resi's talking about Teal, here's the information, and then it shows up first for that. Same with Conveyor. They're included on a competitor website. Their information is here. They're using a competitor to be able to validate information about you. And I just have a little document here that shows like what needs to be updated on G2. I did a LinkedIn post on this that I can share with everybody that dives a little bit deeper on what you want to optimize for G2. In here, I'm just showing like really GPT going through its deep research process and how it surfaces information, like how deep it goes. It does run G2, it does run Capterra, it does run vendor. So these third-party websites, you want to make sure your information is accurate on. So when GPT goes to run through this information, it's pulling accurate data. And then just citations and brand mentions, basically saying like these two are not the same things. Backlinks are somebody linking back to your website from their website. A brand mention is somebody just mentioning your brand on their website. AI is smart enough to be able to, again, read context. So you do not have to have a backlink on somebody else's website in order for AI to be able to pick that up. And then the last piece of this is just including FAQs in your bottom of funnel content. Even better if you can pull it straight from a sales call and include that FAQ on not just bottom of funnel content, but your product pages too. Uh, Tends to increase citations quite a bit. So I'm going to leave it there because I know we need some time for questions. But essentially, like this is the process that you're going to want to go through for this. But I think the big takeaway is like everything is built on customer information. Once you get a hold of that, then you can start tailoring content to answer their queries more specifically.
Awesome. Lashay, thank you so much. This was fantastic. Yeah, everybody clap it up, send those clapping emojis if you can. Yeah, thank you so much for walking through that, or should I say rushing through that? I know that
I know,
there's so
yeah,
much information.
I
Yeah,
wanted to spend some more time on it, guys. Like I wanted to go deeper, but I know we only have an hour here. But I tried to cover
yeah.
as much as I could in terms of like the process itself.
No, we really appreciate it. And you know how you broke down the four well, there's five phases, but you broke down the four of the bottom of the
Yes.
funnel content system. And you also had that really cool Venn diagram around the questions coming from sales, product, and customer success, which is a really
Yeah.
great reminder that the best content just comes from strong cross-functional teams, right?
Yes.
Um, so yeah, during your presentation, we've had a couple of questions come in. We also have a couple of questions that our company wanted to know internally. So we're
Sure.
going to take the next 10 minutes to jump into those. So to start off our Q&A, we're going to talk a little bit about best of, quote unquote, best of listicles and comparison
Yes.
blogs. So, you know, there's been a lot of discussion recently about these self-promotional best of listicles not performing as well as they used to, especially
Right.
where a company ranks their product in that number one spot on their own listicle and then lists
Right.
competitors underneath. You know, about a year
Right.
ago, this was a very common SEO and GEO tactic. And those pages often showed up in AI generated answers, right? The more that you were listed in the number one spot, the more the AI kind of used that information to create its own listing, right? But now
Right.
we're starting to see some signals that these pages might be declining in performance. Maybe Google and its algorithm has have finally caught up with the whole tactic per se. So what is your perspective on how content teams should move forward and approach comparison and best of listicles, you know, writing forward? Like, do we need to be more hands-on and testing our competitors' tools to make more, you know, transparent uh, comparisons and write-ups and sticking to a proper ranking methodology if we want to drive more bottom of the funnel conversions?
For sure. So I think first of all, like whenever you include a competitor, you want to make sure the information is as accurate as you can possibly get it. So even when I'm doing a deep research on Perplexity, I'm building constraints within the prompt to say, if you are unsure about something, please let me know. Flag it for me so I can review it. So I think it's very, very important. But what I do tell the people, it's like, we only have the information that we have publicly. We don't have access to their internal documentation. So we can't really get down into the super, super specifics. Again, we only have what's publicly available, um, which is flips back to why I tell people to make sure the information that you do have publicly available is accurate. Because the same way you're pulling information on your competitors, they're pulling information on you too, to include in their listicles or what have you, their versus landing pages. And, up until this point, I'm always testing like every single day. Up until this point, I haven't seen it be a problem for you to include your solution as the first solution. Now, I do get like some sort of like more like ethical concerns of like, well, it's biased to include myself first, and people are going to think I'm full of myself. And it's like, here's the thing, if they're on your website, we have to assume that they're smart enough to understand, okay, I'm on this website and I'm reading this article. The the thought here is that they probably know you're going to include yourself first. And I think it's okay to do that if you really are the better solution. Not, and I say that because being the better solution could be subjective. Like if you really have features and capabilities that outperform a competitor's based on what you know about them publicly, again, you don't have internal access to documentation. Whatever you know publicly, if you actually do perform the features and the capabilities better, there's nothing wrong with talking about that. We don't have to shame anybody else. Loom and Vidyard, I think Loom did an article on this and it was really good, but I think they've recently took it down, but it was an amazing article. It was Loom versus Vidyard. Nobody shamed anybody. Nobody, they just said use Loom if you want to do this and use Vidyard if you want to do this type of thing. So it's, to me, to answer your question, I think I haven't found that to be an issue as of yet. Will it be next week? Lord knows. Like AI updates every single day. Like we don't know. But as of this point, yes, you definitely want to make sure the information you're doing on competitors is as accurate as you can get it. Yeah.
Got it. Appreciate the answer there. We have a related follow-up question from AD here. And if I'm not going in order, I'm just going by relevance,
Sure.
folks. So the question is, what if I have reached about my direct competitors but don't want to compete, but to bring the unique features of my product in public and increase sales and leads? Any suggestions, please? Um,
My question would be how does some, and feel free to push back, but how does somebody know your features are unique if it's not being compared to anything else? Like, do you mean they're just unique in terms of like just it's so differentiated that they don't even have to see what another competitor is doing to know this is really, really unique? Is it one of those situations? Um, because I would think that if you were to compare these really unique features to a competitor whose features aren't so nice and unique, you could clearly compare and contrast for the reader why you are the better solution. That would be my thought. Do I have clients that are like, hey, I really don't want to include anybody in this article. Can we still do a bottom of funnel post on it? Yeah, absolutely. Like, we can still do that. Do I recommend that every time? No. But there are circumstances where things get a little tight and I'm like, okay, we can just do a best post. Like, what's the best payroll management software? And the post is all about them. I have articles ranking first for that, where we've done that too. But it's just like, I would encourage you to think about how well could your features and capabilities shine if they were able to compare directly on your post what you do versus what somebody else does. Because the assumption that you need to think is that they're either going to have your post and the other person's post side by side looking at both, or they're going to do a, an LLM search on the other competitor too, right? So I think there are a couple things to think through there, but I would implore you to like think like, can I show my features off by themselves well, or is it more impactful if I directly compare them to a competitor whose features aren't as great?
got it. Got it. We have a follow-up question here. As per listicle ranking, and this is from Odeon, to be fair, is it okay to drop a sentence block stating how you may have arrived at this list? And also make a point to note that the enumeration is in no positional order, but the collation of the best X we could find for Y.
Sure, I think so. I don't think there's any harm with like dropping a block in there about that if it's more of a comfort thing. Now, mind you, I would say it's more of a comfort thing because again, I have at least on my end, I haven't seen not including that affect how you show up in LLM search. I haven't seen it. But if it's more of like an ethical type of thing that you just want to include in there, feel free. Again, I haven't had my clients included in their articles, so I can't tell you if including it makes a difference. But what I can tell you is that not including it doesn't make a difference. So I would say, yeah, if you feel like that's something you want to try and just add a block in there, I can't see it affecting too much, to be honest, in terms of AI visibility and ranking and things like that. Yeah.
Got it. We have Vignesh who has asked this question twice, so I feel like we should bring it up. He has a bottom of the funnel listicle generating hundreds of visitors per month, but no conversion. In your opinion, does a blog or landing page, which page format is best for driving more leads?
So I would ask him, what's included in the listicle? Like, do you have pain points in it? Are you connecting the capabilities of the product to the pain points that your audience is having? How deep do you go into features in the listicle? Are you showing the capabilities of like how the product works step by step? You know, because typically at that point, if it's definitely obviously a conversion problem, but typically when it's a conversion problem, it's more of like you not best demonstrating what value you offer to them. If it's getting traffic, that's great. That's half the battle. Now it's like, okay, how do we get them to convert? And again, the best thing I've seen is just like including real customer insight. If they hit that article and they see, boom, pain point one, two, three, and all of those pain points are actual pain points that your audience is dealing with, they're going to stay. I've seen duration rates on bottom of funnel articles as long as 8 minutes. So people are actually reading these articles if they find it relevant, but you have to hook them immediately. Like starting the article with in today's current landscape and like, nah, like, and especially people more bottom of funnel, their intent is higher. So they know what the thing is. You don't have to explain that to them. You need to like immediately start diving into what they care about. So I would feel free to DM me on LinkedIn about that and we can kind of like go have a little bit of back and forth about that. But I would be curious about those questions. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, great answer. Odium with a follow-up question here. Also, is the best way to buttress a competitive advantage over a competitor be, say, using a community conversation on the poor feature of the competitor and state that in context, would this be talking down on competitors, even if there's social proof for a case?
uh
Good question.
I mean, it's subject. Like it depends on what you look at as talking down on a competitor. So, like, let me use my tool for example. So, with BOFU, my direct competitors are Copy.ai and Jasper. Now, if I write a bottom of funnel article and I say, "Well, Jasper can't write good bottom of funnel content," I mean, it's not a lie, you know? And it's not necessarily me saying, like, oh, they're terrible at every type of content, but they can't create this specific type of content well. How do I know? Well, because I used the product and I tried and it was terrible. That, again, that's a subjective opinion. Somebody else might use Jasper and they might think it's the best thing in the world, you know? So I would think about, like, in my opinion, you talking about what another competitor does not do well is not talking down on them. It's all about framing. It's not like you're saying that this is a shit product, it's terrible. It's more of like you're just this is what we do well and this is what we don't do well. So even if I was talking about maybe I would say like if you're looking for bottom of funnel content, use BOFU.ai. If you're looking for more top of funnel thought leadership, things that don't involve the product being weaved in, look at Jasper. Again, it's more framing. It's not like me saying Jasper is a terrible product. It's just me saying it does not cover the specific use case as well as I do.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for that. Two more questions. Sorry, folks, we have to wrap up pretty soon. Zuheb asks, how do you maintain originality when you're creating hundreds of BOFU pages through your AI workflows?
It's a great question. So I use artifacts. Unfortunately, I couldn't get too deep into that during this workshop, but like those things that you saw, like those reports and all that, those are artifacts. When I use those artifacts, I upload them to the Claude project, and that's my sort of originality. Again, if you're pulling information from internal documents, you're using your customers as language. You're not looking at another website on the internet saying, "Oh, I like that positioning. Let me take that and bring it over here." Like everything that you generate is from actual market data, first party market data, like sales calls and CS calls and things like that. So the originality is internal. Like that's where it's pulled from. Now you can have like writing guidelines and things like that. One cool way to like produce writing guidelines for anybody that's looking to do that is produce an article, give Claude the raw version and the edited version, and say, spot the differences between the two, and then make me a writing guideline, right? So there are like different little things you can do in order to get that original, I guess, that originality you speak of. But I think there's nothing more original than taking information directly from your customers or your prospects, um, and using that in the content. I don't think it gets any more original than that. I mean, in terms of top of
Yeah,
funnel, huh, top of funnel is more narrative based. So it's more of like, here's the status quo, and then here's my positioning on the status quo. Here's why you should listen to me. So the originality piece plays a little bit more, I want to be careful how I say that, into top of funnel because it's more narrative driven. Where bottom of funnel is more like process driven. Here's our product, here's your workflow, here's how it connects, buy my thing. It's a little more straightforward, but I hope that kind of answers the question in terms of like, there's nothing more original than pulling from your prospect conversations and putting that in content. And how do you scale
got it.
that? Frameworks. That's how you scale it. 100%.
Okay, I want to riff on this a little bit more because this goes back to when you said how to create good bottom of the funnel content is
Yes.
from strong cross-functional collaboration, right?
Yes.
Asking the right questions from sales, product, CS, right? And I think one of the biggest challenges for many SEO teams, because SEO teams and content teams, there's a lot of overlap there,
Yes.
is trying to get credible first party insights into content, especially when you're
Right.
an agency, right? Trying to
Yeah.
get into those teams, right? Whether it's usage data or customer insights or internal benchmarks or what their tool is taking in the past month versus the previous month, right? Do you
Right.
have any good strategies, practical strategies on how we can extract those insights that are not like, let's say you're trying to compile like a quarterly report or something like that. Like, how do
Mhm.
we extract those insights from these internal teams, especially as an agency that is, sort of a partner there, and turning that into content that's both unique and also scalable? Do you have any recommendations when it comes to that?
I would say build it into your workflow. So a part of your onboarding process should be give me as many internal documents as you have on the customer. When you build it into the onboarding process, it's a natural step for them. It doesn't feel foreign, like, oh, well, why do you want access to my information and so on and so forth. And especially if you can sort of educate them on how you tie that to the broader initiative of, okay, here's what we need, here's why it ties together, I need this information. But in terms of like what people used to have to do is hold subject matter expert interviews for a lot of the different pieces that they wanted to create. Not saying you shouldn't do that, but if you're like in a time crunch, it's like, God, I don't have time to wait for a subject matter expert. I got to book a call with them and we got to do the interview and I got to transcribe it. And it's a lot to do. So it's like, I find to mitigate that longer process, going to maybe it's one person on each team. Maybe somebody from the product team can give you access to product information, or one person from sales can give you sales call transcripts. It depends on the size of the company. Typically, startups can get you this information much easier because there's less silos. It's like literally two marketers and the founder, and it's easy to get you that
Yeah.
information. But I find like the bigger, like if it's more of a mid-market company, it might be a little bit more difficult to get that information. Again, like even when I was working with clients, we used to just spend 30 days alone on customer research because it would take me that long to get the information. But for sure, like build it into your workflow. Like have that be a core part of the beginning of the engagement. And then once you have all that information, then you take it, talk to the client, be like, okay, what can we and what can we not include publicly? Document that information now because that's really a lot of the time what they're afraid of. They don't
Hmm.
want to cite specific internal information that's supposed to stay internal. Like that's where the fear usually comes from. Yeah.
Got it. Got it. Cool. All right. Last question, Lashay. Thank you so much for,
Yes.
answering all of this. This one comes from Sarah. How do you build effective BOFU content when compliance restricts what you can say. In finance, regulatory guardrails often mean things like no customer testimonials without lengthy approval, limited use of specific results or outcomes, restriction on claims and comparisons. Every piece needs legal compliance sign off. What's a workaround? I'm curious about how other marketers in compliance heavy sectors are solving for this.
That's a great question. So I would say understand what the guardrails are. My advice would be to build an artifact specifically around your guardrails. Um, the reason I like that idea is because for any piece of content that you produce, it has to go, that artifact has to be used as a filter before your content piece is produced. In terms of getting like approvals and things like that, like one way you could try to get around it, at least from the case study side, is having like anonymized case studies. That tends to work well too. Um, of course, it's better if you can like include the company, but again, the regulatory, I totally get it. Um, but anonymized case studies, and again, like all these compliance sort of rules, work on building an artifact specifically around the rules that you are said to abide by. That way, you're giving the AI guardrails of when it creates the content. So you can say, hey, I need a case study on this, so and so forth. Can you anonymize it for me? And not only will Claude, and I love Claude for this, but not only will Claude anonymize it, but also it'll take that artifact into account when it's producing the content. So it doesn't include a specific reference that you're not legally allowed to include or, whatever is in those guidelines. But I would definitely say, like, so you don't have to like dreadfully dig into each specific piece and make sure it covers the guidelines. I mean, you still kind of got to do that a little bit, but like create an artifact around guidelines for sure. That should lighten the lift on some of that in terms of like, are we including anything in this content that we're not legally allowed to include? You just have to let the AI know, like, okay, here's our company standard. Here's what we can and cannot include. Yeah.
Got it. Awesome. Well, amazing knowledge transfer today, Lashay. You covered so much ground from the strategic side of BOFU content all the way through to practical frameworks that teams can use. Just a quick note for everybody in the audience, those that are still here, we'll be sending out the recording of today's session along with slides. So keep an eye out for that email shortly. Before we wrap up, Lashay, if people want to continue the conversation, ask follow-up questions, or learn more about your work that you're
Yeah.
doing with BOFU.ai, what's the best place for them to connect with you?
LinkedIn. I do some pretty good well, at least I like to think it's pretty good.
It is pretty
Content
good.
on LinkedIn. Thank you. LinkedIn is great. I'm starting a Substack. I'll be doing a lot of deep dives on Substack. Follow me there. And go to the BOFU.ai website, right? I have built or am building an entire company around educating people on this very thing. So if you really want to like dive into the rabbit hole, go over there, check out some stuff, get the playbook that I created. Oh man, probably like a month ago. It's been 200 people that have grabbed it in the last week. It's really good. So if you really want to deep dive on this stuff, just grab the playbook. And yeah, I'll reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to talk.
Awesome. Well, we'll make sure to include those links in the recap email as well as the YouTube description once this recording goes live. And for anyone who's thinking about turning their blog into a real inbound pipeline engine, whether that's through better BOFU strategy or stronger SEO execution, feel free to connect with Lashay, or you could also reach out to us at TripleDart. We'd love to keep the conversation going. Lashay, thank you again for joining us today and sharing your expertise with our community. We really appreciate you coming on to Coach by TripleDart, and I know a lot of people are here excited to start applying what they learned today.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. And again, I hate that I had to like blow through it a little bit. I promise I will have more sessions where I do more like over the shoulder deep dives where we can like build this thing together. But hopefully you got some value from this. You can take some of this and just even if it helps you start thinking about content differently and how to scale quality, I've done my job.
If anybody wants over the shoulder part two of this webinar, feel free to share in the chat before we sign off. But yeah, everybody, thank you, Lashay, so much. And yeah, we hope to see you next time.
Sure, sure thing. Thank you so much, Glenn.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye. Cheers. Have a great day, night, wherever you are. See you next time.